then. So we have here some symbols of the rays. There are many symbols for all the rays, but these are some of the main ones. And we start with the sword, which is a symbol of the first ray of will or power. Of course, the sword is a very powerful symbol. We have Excalibur, for instance, in the days of King Arthur. It's a weapon of war, but it's also a ceremonial implement used in ceremonial magic, which of course relates it to the seventh ray. We have the sword of discrimination that the Buddhists talk about. Many different interesting ideas around the sword, but essentially it's the first ray of will or power. It cuts through to the chase, so to speak. It gets to the point. The third ray tends to meander around and, take its time in broadening, but the first ray just wants to cut to the chase and get to the point and get to the heart of the matter. So the sword is a great symbol for the first ray. Second ray, one of the symbols, is the pen. And you've probably heard the old saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. Well, that was probably coined by a second ray person. Arguably, depending on your soul ray, one may be greater than the other. And of course, the second ray is ruled by Jupiter, whose day is Thursday, which is the day of our classes, and probably why I wear a blue shirt every week in honor of Jupiter and the second ray, love, wisdom. The great teaching ray and teaching day, in fact. So there we have the pen as a symbol of the second ray, love, wisdom. Then for the third ray, we have the labyrinth. It's a classic symbol for the third ray, or the jigsaw puzzle, the ramifying complexity of the third ray that is really relates to many different puzzles. The stage magic, which is like sleight of hand, as opposed to ceremonial magic, which is a completely different thing. Third ray of active intelligence. So there's the labyrinth, lost in the labyrinth, you can say. Some countries are very third ray with their roads. They're like spaghetti, particularly Italy. So I've experienced this third ray getting lost in the maze of roads and labyrinthine pathways. So we can remember, we can relate the rays to anything, any living thing, whether it's a country, a city, a tradition, a belief, so forth. Next up, we have the happy, sad masks of the theatre for the fourth ray. And here we have the range of human emotion from one extreme to the other. And the fourth ray is ruled by Mercury and the moon has a lot to do in exoteric astrology with the emotions, with the feelings, with the high and low tides of emotion, the extremes of emotion, the emotional tsunamis that we experience at times. Of course, the fourth ray of harmony through conflict, also called the ray of art and beauty. So the fourth ray really governs most of the arts in many ways. Of course, those arts are conditioned by other rays as well, as we'll explore later on in some of our tabulations. Next up, the sixth ray, the Holy Bible, or any religious text for that matter, is to do with the sixth ray of devotion and idealism. The ray ruled by, I should say, Mars and Neptune, the co-rulers of the sixth ray, that can create the religious fanatic or the fundamentalist or the super idealist in terms of trying to touch that which is in the mind of the divine. I missed the fifth ray. And here it is up here with the microscope. You could also have a telescope or many other scientific apparatus to represent the fifth ray. fifth ray of science, or knowledge as it's called, ruled by Venus, the highest self to this planet. And of course, the microscope helps us to see the unseen. It's a deeply occult instrument, as is the telescope. It helps bring into focus what we can't see with our normal vision. And of course, when you get into the electron microscope, then you can see atoms and so forth. So likewise with the telescope, we can reach beyond the farther reaches of the solar system now with the Webb telescope and so forth. So science has really taken us a long way in the last couple of 100 years, extraordinarily, and will continue to do so as we go into the age of Aquarius, where the fifth ray is prominent as coming through the sign of Aquarius, the only ray, in fact, which comes through Aquarius. Then for the seventh ray, we have the seventh ray of ceremonial magic or organization. We have Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. But this symbol could equally be the business executive of a large organization. And the word organization infers to organize a bunch of people to work on a particular product or theme. So the seventh ray is a ray that brings spirit, which the first ray represents, into matter. The seventh ray represents the seventh plane, the physical plane. So we have these extremes, and of course, as I've noted before in the other class, there are many different relationships between the rays. There's the 1, 3, 5, 7 line, the odd ray line of will. There's the 2, 4, 6 line of love, wisdom, that have an affinity with each other. But then there are special relationships between an odd ray and an even ray. For instance, the first ray of will or power and the fourth ray of harmony through conflict is supposedly the ray structure, or the rays that the main governing rays of Master Moya's ashram, Master Moya being the Shohan or custodian of the first ray. Karen says, so we know that the soul ray can change. How about the monads ray? The monads ray is always the same, and the soul ray only changes once. The personality ray changes ideally every incarnation to avoid crystallization, although there may be some instances, I think there are some instances where the same personality ray goes from lifetime, 1 or 2 lifetimes in a row. So we move on. Glamour. We're gonna go through all the glamours today of the rays. And there's a lot of glamour in the world. There's even magazines called Glamour. I think I saw a glamour cafe the other day somewhere. I meant to take a photo of it. And it rules the whole advertising industry, of course, who throw their particular shroud of glamour around people to sell fashion, celebrity, magazines, to be glamorous, to there's a lot of interesting philosophy behind this. We're going to have 3 classes on glamour, at least 2 anyway, in the future part of the course. So we'll deal with the 3 aspects of glamour, which are called Maya, glamour, and illusion. Maya is more to do with the illusion of the physical plane. Glamour is more to do with the astral plane. And illusion is more to do with the mental plane. So we have glamours of all the rays. The first ray of will or power. Power, of course, relating to the glamour of physical strength. So when we consider the signs of the zodiac that a ray comes through, sometimes there's 2 signs, sometimes there's 3 or 4 signs. Leo, Capricorn are very strong with the first ray. And you can relate some of these glamours to those signs. That's what I'm getting at here. Whether you've got any planets in that sign or not. First ray, of course, rules adventurers, politicians, statesmen, leaders, And so there's the glamour of personal magnetism. This ray is very magnetic. It's the most powerful ray. It's the ray that humanity least understands or knows how to use responsibly at this point in our evolution. It's the energy of Shambhala, in fact, and we're still getting used to that. The point of least resistance for the first ray is to use it selfishly. So we have the glamour of self-centeredness and personal potency, the glamour of the one at the center, the glamour of selfish personal ambition, the glamour of rulership, of dictatorship, and of wide control. And so we can think of signs like Aries and Leo, which take the first ray through it. Aries in this cycle is the strongest expression of the first ray, and it's the first sign of the zodiac too, of course. The glamour of the Messiah complex in the field of politics. We've seen a few of those over the years, have we not? The glamour of selfish destiny, of the divine right of kings personally exacted. And of course, all through history, going back through the centuries, we see many examples of this, especially in, for instance, Shakespeare's plays, where we have many plays that are centered around various monarchies. The glamour of destruction. Pluto is the co-ruler of the first ray. Pluto is the destroyer. And the first ray destroys, but it also builds. Vulcan is the smithy, who's the co-ruler of the first ray, who builds anew that which has been destroyed. The glamour of isolation, of aloneness, of aloofness. This is another factor relating to Vulcan, actually, and the first ray. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you relate to any of these glamours that you have that particular ray in your makeup. It could be explained by astrologically, as I said before, the rays express themselves through different signs. Andy says, when you say the fifth ray, the only ray that comes through Aquarius, we are still a second ray planet. We have still a resonance of our unique expression with all the other rays, right? Well, we're not really a second ray planet. You could say that Earth is a first ray monad, a second ray soul, and a third ray personality. We have a unique expression according to our ray structure, whatever that is, but not necessarily all the rays. My quick answer on that one. And so we come to the second ray of love wisdom, the glamour of the love of being loved, bearing in mind here that the second ray is the most common soul ray. And so, and after all, we are all learning love wisdom. And so there is this very basic glamour that all of us, most people, may suffer from, or not necessarily suffer, but express in one way or another, except perhaps really sort of full-on first-ray types. So the love of being loved is the opposite of the first-ray glamour of isolation, of aloneness, of aloofness, is it not? The glamour of popularity, a similar one. So again, we have this magnetic energy of Jupiter and the Sun as the co-rulers of the second ray of love wisdom. Glamour of personal wisdom, again, another Jupiterian factor. Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, the sign that the moon is in at the moment, and the sun, of course. We just had the new moon yesterday. And we've got Venus and Mercury in Sagittarius right now. So a great time to pursue the ageless wisdom. So the glamour of personal wisdom, we really have to ideally sit with these expressions and reflect upon them for a few minutes each. In other words, what is the glamour of personal wisdom? You know, there's someone who who likes being wise, if you like, who is sagacious, to use a Sagittarian word, but not necessarily truly wise, if you know what I mean. The glamour of selfish responsibility. So taking responsibility for something that is selfishly motivated, as opposed to no kind of personality concerns in taking on that responsibility in the first place. The glamour of too complete an understanding which negates right action. I know some second-rate types who are deep esoteric scholars. You can have some amazing conversations with them. But they are so focused up there on the abstract level that right action or practical action is negated. The glamour of self-pity, a basic glamour of this ray and a basic glamour of humanity. Self-pity. Oh, poor old me. And this is the basic self-focus of the second ray. The glamour of the Messiah complex in the world of religion and world need. The glamour of fear based on undue sensitivity. Fear is probably the most ancient and deep-set glamour for humanity as a whole. It's the last head of the Hydra in some respect. It's like the 10th head of the Hydra. The glamour of self-sacrifice. This is a bit like the six-ray glamour of the missionary going to save the non-religious in some developing country. The glamour of selfish unselfishness. That's a good one, isn't it? I think you can work that out. The glamour of self-satisfaction, the glamour of selfish service. A couple of questions to look at here. We'll just pause for a second. I can't really address the question there with the fifth ray in Aquarius. We have got a fair bit of material to get through, so you need to ask these questions very specifically. Sometimes I can't get the gist of what the actual question is. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. All right, so when you ask a question, please think them out and try and use the right glamour, the glamour of grammar. That must be a third ray grammar, but the right grammar and spelling, it makes it much easier for me to quickly and think the question out, think it through, and frame your question as specifically as you can. Thank you. So we move on to, well, I've got these various pictures interspersed here. This is the glamour of celebrity, which is something that's very, in the last few decades, has become quite acute around the world. And one of the reasons for it is, I want to outline here, is that many people are emerging from mass consciousness. Cancer is a sign that rules mass consciousness. Leo is a sign that is more to do with individualized consciousness. Leo is the opposite sign to Aquarius, the sign we're going into now. And so many people are moving out of mass consciousness into individualized consciousness, and therefore are becoming far more individual as opposed to being part of the herd. And so they want their 15 minutes of fame, they want to make their mark, so to speak, and they may be close to the first initiation and the many lives that follow after that before the second initiation. So we have a celebrity culture that we live in now, which is pretty awful in many respects, and it's tied into the movie industry, the pop culture, the music culture, and so forth. So much glamour is expressed through all those mediums. All right, so we move on to the third ray. The third ray is in we're in a cycle of the third ray within a third ray within a third ray at the moment, a sub-cycle of a sub-cycle of the third ray, which has a lot to do with manufacturing, media, and so it's also very similar to the third sign, Gemini, as I might have said before. And so the glamours here are very evident in the world today, the glamour of being busy. We are so busy and are getting busier and busier every year, every decade. I've never known it to be so busy as it is today. It's almost to the point of chaos, in fact. I was only discussing this with someone today. The glamour of cooperation with the plan in an individual and not a group way. So there's a recognition of the plan, but it's my way or the highway, so to speak. The glamour of active scheming. This is a classic spider in the web, which is another great symbol of the third ray, in fact, the spider at the center of his web. The glamour of creative work without true motive. Third ray is a very creative ray and works closely with the fourth ray in terms of artistic expression. New York City is a third ray personality, and you have many great examples of many different disciplines in the arts there, creative work. The glamour of good intentions, which are basically selfish, the glamour of the spider at the center, the glamour of God in the machine. I've pointed out these rays with various personalities that I've covered in newsletters over the years. The glamour of devious and continuous manipulation. The glamour of self-importance from the standpoint of knowing and of efficiency. Third ray types are very efficient with energy and with money and resources. They can be the glamour of efficiency. Any good trait can be a glamour if it's taken too far, if it's overemphasized or over-focused upon. So we come to the fourth ray, the glamour of harmony, aiming at personal comfort and satisfaction. Ray 4 is a little bit like Libra, the sign of peace, or the peacemaker. And Ray 4, like Librans, tend to want to avoid conflict and keep the peace at any cost, even if that cost means not saying what they mean and meaning what they say. And so the life is lived inauthentically as a result. The glamour of war. The fourth ray is the main ray that rules over humanity, and we've been at war with each other for the last 20-odd million years, in fact, let alone the last few centuries, let alone the last 1 century. The glamour of conflict with the objective of imposing righteousness and peace. And we know various nations that fit right into that category. The glamour of vague artistic perception. This is a very interesting one for the fourth ray, which means that there is something sensed, but it's not. The person is not able to grasp it and to express it or to bring it through, so to speak. Mercury and the Moon are the 2 rulers of the fourth ray. Saturn and the Earth are the 2 rulers of the third ray. So the third ray is a very good manifesting ray. Fourth ray, because its rulership of Mercury and the Moon, can tend to be a little bit unanchored and unfocused. Mercury, the mercurial Mercury that kind of moves around a lot, and the Moon, which is a fast-moving body. Just checking, can you see my picture there, Natalia? I can't see it there, not that I want to look at myself, but just wonder if it's working or not.
You mean right now? Oh, the
Yeah,
picture is,
my picture on the camera.
yes, you
My,
can.
yeah,
Perfect.
okay. I don't know where it is. It's disappeared somewhere. Anyway.
Okay, we can.
The glamour of psychic perception instead of intuition. The fourth ray is probably the most intuitive ray, Mercury as the ruler being one of the most intuitive planets. And the psychic perception, of course, is related to the moon, which is like the lower psychism. So Mercury is the higher intuition, the moon is the psychic perception. The glamour of musical perception. The glamour of the pairs of opposites in the higher sense, whatever that means. That may take some time to reflect upon. Now I have a fourth ray glamour here somewhere. No. Glamours of ray 5. Now ray 5 has just had a very powerful cycle that was withdrawn back in, well, last century actually. But because it had such an intense incarnation for a couple of centuries, we're still really feeling its effects. And of course, as Aquarius comes in, we're going to feel the ray 5 just via that sign. Ray 5 is a grounding ray. It's a practical ray. It has to do with science and knowledge and the study of the material study of things through the microscope in the chemistry lab, all that kind of stuff. So the shadow of that is the glamour of materiality, the overemphasis upon the form. And we see this in many ways. You see some TV shows, for instance, that are examining past ancient cultures, and they're interpreting from the dead letter of the evidence instead of esoterically. There is a classic sort of overemphasis upon the form. The glamour of the intellect, obviously. The intellect, of course, is a great positive quality of the fifth ray, but it can be glamour as well. But it also is related to illusion. The mental plane itself is related to illusion, which is glamour upon the mental plane. And so with this development of science in the last couple of 100 years, we have scientists who are brilliant in their own particular fields, but they still suffer from both glamour and illusion, from belief, which is more to do with glamour, and from an adamant certainty in that their knowledge is correct. So, and this comes to the glamour of knowledge and definition, the glamour of assurance based upon a narrow point of view. Glamour of the form, which hides reality. The glamour of organization, which one would think would be related to the seventh ray. Obviously, the seventh ray and the fifth ray work very closely together, 3, 5, and 7, or 1, 3, 5, 7. The glamour of the outer, which hides the inner. And this slide's a bit hard to look at. It's just a good symbol of illusion. All right. Ray 6 now has been going out of incarnation since 1625, but it was in incarnation for so long, its potency is still very powerful. And of course, we have various nations that have the 6-ray personality, such as Russia and USA. Ray 6 is the most common astral body ray. And so we have the glamour of devotion. The 6th ray is called the ray of devotion and idealism. Ray 6 ruled by Mars and Neptune. The glamour of adherence to forms and persons, which of course we can look at the glamour of adherence to beliefs, which creates fundamentalism. The glamour of idealism itself, the name of this ray, and devotion. The glamour of loyalties and of creeds. which ties into a kind of tribalism. The glamour of emotional response, whatever that might be exactly. The glamour of sentimentality you see often in films that comes quite often as like a punch in the stomach that is designed, is like a deliberate ploy to get you to emote, to move you, as movies do. And six-ray types, nations are more prone to sentimentality than others. The glamour of interference, likewise. These two, sentimentality and interference, are strongly related to the USA again. No, I'm not picking on the USA, by the way, of course. Of many essays that are written on USA and the rays and its astrology. The glamour of the lower pairs of opposites, whatever that might be exactly. The glamour of world saviors and teachers. And we can look at the various missionaries and crusaders that come under this kind of heading. And you'll note, of course, that teachers is related to the second ray of love wisdom. And this is a ray that's on the 246 line. The glamour of narrow vision is a particularly potent one for the sixth ray, particularly with its rulership of Mars and Mars's association with Sagittarius, which is the narrow one-pointed vision of the archer. The glamour of fanaticism is one of the main glamours of the sixth ray. Fanaticism, not just in religion, but in any field of human expression. And again, this is an emotional attachment to a certain idea that creates fanaticism and fundamentalism. Okay, ray 7, the glamour of magical work. Magical work can be literally doing magical ritual in the old sort of Western style of magic, for instance, and being caught up in all the paraphernalia, or in Wicca, for instance, as well. The glamour of the relation of the opposites. The glamour of the subterranean powers, of the underworld, if you like, of that which is hidden and which is dark and a little bit suspect or extremely suspect. People can be attracted to those, to the mystery of that. And so we have the glamour of the mysterious and the secret associated with this. The glamour of that which brings together. The seventh ray is a grounding ray for the first ray. It brings spirit into matter. So the satisfaction of doing that can create a glamour. The glamour of the physical body. As we have just started a seventh ray cycle in 1945, and the seventh ray is ruled by Uranus, which also rules the sacral, the sexual chakra. So you can see the glamour of the physical body, and of course the huge revolution in fitness in the last few decades, with gyms, people working out, which is great because it's all about, especially when you're close to the first initiation, there's a greater urge to align the etheric body with the physical body. If one gets that first taste of Christ consciousness, which comes into your system, then changing diet and working with exercise and so forth helps to bring about an equilibrium between the old status quo frequency and the new frequency, the higher frequency that's come in. So we have the glamour of the physical body, though, of course, people going to extremes with building themselves up and looking grotesque as a result. That's a good example of the glamour of the physical body. Well, just to focus on that, which of course is so potent in all our media and celebrity consciousness and the clickbait that you see on social media, all that kind of stuff. The glamour, therefore, of sex magic. And all these glamours are very strongly in expression at the moment as the seventh ray and the Aquarian age start to both increase in their potency. The glamour of the emerging manifested forces, whatever that might be. I don't have an explanation for all these ones. Some of them are deeply esoteric. So just stop for a moment. No questions in the chat. I hope I didn't scare anyone off. Asking a right question there. All right. So we have seventh ray symbol here of an old magical book and doing a ritual with candles and so forth. So looking at famous personalities in history is a great way of seeing how the rays express. And we've got a list here of famous personalities that I've taken from Michael Robinson's book, Tapestry of the Gods, Volume 1 and 2, which you can download for free, as I mentioned before, from my website or from the internet. And also you can buy these books. If you really want to examine the rays, this new esoteric psychology, then they're essential books, I think, for a really in-depth study. And so we have these different columns of the rays, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1, 7. And when we look at these sub-rays of the main ray, like the second ray being the sub-ray of the first ray here, for instance, we're looking at, in fact, the ashrams, the 7 times 7 ray ashrams that we all belong to one or another of. Not all of them have manifested yet, but essentially that 7 times 7 equals 49 groupings of souls fulfill the purpose of the planetary logos, of God's plan, if you like. So we can start this first column here with the 1, 2, the first ray of will or power, the ray of politics. You can see all the politicians here. Gandhi, Gorbachev, Abraham Lincoln, FDR, JFK, Akbar the Great, who was in fact a previous incarnation of the Master Moya. But we have Walt Whitman here as well, the poet. We have Helena Rurik, who was a scribe for the Master Moya with her books called Agni Yoga. We have Gandhi, who was an advocate of ahimsa, of peace, very much to do with Libra in his horoscope, but also the second ray of love wisdom. We have Gorbachev, who made such a great connection with Ronald Reagan, both of them strong on the 2, 4, 6 line, but also with the first ray in their makeup, or at least with Gorbachev anyway. Abraham Lincoln, who is regarded, DK tells us, as the avatar, a racial avatar, he calls him in fact. So probably an advanced initiate, perhaps the 4th degree or something like that. A triple Aquarian, Abraham Lincoln. FDR, of course, who DK calls that great disciple and who did a lot for the USA in the 1930s from the Great Depression onwards, as did his wife. Helena Rurik, of course, JFK. These are all towering people who expressed the first or second ray. We're not sure, or Michael, when he wrote the book, wasn't sure necessarily 100% certain whether that individual was as a first ray soul and a second ray personality, but that's pretty close. I think in many cases he's pretty close. So when we have third ray types, as a sub-ray of the first ray, we have Lyndon Johnson, LBJ, Cleopatra, and with each person that one studies, there may not be obvious factors coming to mind with regard to that ray. You may have to dig a bit to look at the life of that person. The third ray, for instance, was very strong in Egypt, and perhaps Cleopatra really expressed that in her personality and with the traditions of Egypt. Of course, we have Julius Caesar, a great general, and of course the third ray is the ray of strategy. And Caesar was well known as a great strategist. Then we have Benjamin Disraeli, Odysseus, the great wanderer of the planet, who was an initiate at around about the time of the beginning of the fifth root race. And the third ray has this tendency to be the wanderer. Yasser Arafat, third ray. Richard Nixon, third ray, or Tricky Dicky as they used to call him. The third ray can be like that, very tricky, as we looked at the glamours before of the third ray, of scheming and so forth. Iago from one of Shakespeare's plays, if you know that character. And so again, with a lot of these columns, we find people who are leaders in industry or politics. So we have, with the 1-4 column, Hitler, Churchill, both of them adversaries, the main adversaries to one another from Britain to Germany at that time. Both of them artists, painters, in fact. There's the fourth ray of art. Then we have Napoleon, Gurdjieff, the spiritual teacher from Russia, Alexander the Great, Lorenzo Medici. Of course, the fourth ray is very strong in the nation of Italy, where the Medici family came forth from. Then we have Otto Bismarck, who was pretty much laid the foundation for Nazism and the First and Second World War aggression by Germany. And then we have Henry VIII, off with her head, Henry VIII. And Rachel asked why there are no duplicate numbers like 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. There's no need for that. There's the main ashram of the first ray, which you might be able to call 1, 1, for instance, but essentially there's mainly 6 sub ashrams of the first ray, of each ray. Now, with the 1-5, we have President Truman. I'm not sure exactly how. Maybe if you know about his history, he may have had a scientific bent. Henry Ford, of course, the manufacturer who invented the assembly line. So the third ray would have been strong with him as well, in terms of efficiency, but the fifth ray in terms of technology and science. Gordon Liddy, the guy who investigated Watergate, or who was one of the main characters in Watergate. Alfred Nobel, the initiator of the Scandinavian Peace Prize, and prizes for literature and science. Perhaps it started off more in science, and I think he might have been a scientist himself, actually. J. Edgar Hoover, who used a lot of technology in his spying and surveillance of the American population, and Alfred Krupp. And then we go to the 1-6 types. We have Fidel Castro, a great idealist politically. There's the 6th ray. Garibaldi, the Italian revolutionary. Again, the 6th ray, like the 4th ray, is strong in Italy's makeup. And in fact, I think Blavatsky had something to do with Garibaldi in a major battle. We have Moses as a classic 1-6 sort of, 1-6 is a combination of a powerful first ray and the Bible thumping 6th ray, the preacher. We have Annie Besant, the theosophist. She had possibly a 6th ray personality and a 6th ray astral body, I believe, according to Michael Robbins' assessment of her. In his Tapestry of the Gods, he profiles 7 famous personalities in history and does a lengthy write-up on each one. and Annie Besant was one of them. Lenin, the Russian Lenin, Martin Luther, of course, who pinned his edict to the wall in Germany that started the Protestant Revolution. Othello from Shakespeare, Vanessa Redgrave, another one on the first and sixth ray. I'm not quite sure why exactly, but she has strong Leo in her makeup, I know that. So there's a bit of first ray coming through Leo. 1-7 types, we have Stalin. And when we look at Stalin, who allegedly killed off millions, and of course he worked with Hitler and Churchill for a while, FDR and Churchill as like a triangle. The seventh ray is the soul ray of Russia. Maggie Thatcher, the Iron Lady, is a good example of the first and seventh ray. Lord Kitchener, again, a lot of us need to brush up on our history to really understand some of these personalities. George Washington, one of the founding fathers of the USA. So many politicians, and George Washington was a true statesman. We don't have any statesmen left actually in the world. We only have politicians now, in this cycle anyway. Thomas Jefferson, likewise, another founding father of the United States. So they were both Masons, and Masonry is a seventh ray craft of magical ritual, in fact. And of course, they crafted and drafted the Constitution, which is a very seventh ray of organization type of thing to do. Franco, Solon of ancient Greek fame, and George Marshall. I think he was a general, something like that. We'll move on to the second ray. We may get, how do you work out what your soul ray is, says Rachel. Well, through studying the rays and reflecting upon them in meditation. And it can take quite a while to figure out. It's not something that comes overnight. Some people have been working on the rays for 30 or 40 years, still aren't necessarily 100% certain of their rays. Some of us have 2 or 3 ray structures as a kind of a backup or another set of possibilities. And the reason most of us don't know is because none of us are truly intuitive. If we're truly intuitive, we'd know our rays. So we're meant to study these rays and reflect upon them intuitively to really bring those 2 streams of consciousness together in understanding ourselves, and particularly with understanding famous figures in history, spiritual figures, political figures, in any area of human endeavor, of course. So, any idea where the Rosicrucians stand, says Marcia. I'm not sure what you mean by that question, but the Rosicrucianism is a very seventh ray. I think I mentioned this last week, the week before. It's a very seventh ray order that's like Masonry, that was started by Christian Rosenkreutz, who was allegedly a previous incarnation of the Master Rakotsi, who was the master of the seventh ray ashram for a while, or the Chohan, if you like, of the seventh ray. I'm not sure whether some of you today have been with us in other classes, so you'll need to go back over the other classes, some of you, to catch up, possibly. So the second ray of love wisdom, the main ray of this solar system in many ways, as I've said before, all the other rays are, in a sense, a sub-ray of the second ray. So in the 2-1 department, we have Freud, Sigmund Freud, psychologist. And I guess if you studied his life, you'd work out that he had the first ray as his personality. I haven't personally studied it, so I don't know. Pythagoras, who was a previous incarnation of the Master Kuthumi, who is the current Shohan or custodian of the second ray of love wisdom. Albert Schweitzer, who is probably at least a third degree initiate, I think, who worked in Africa as a doctor, did amazing work, very inspiring biography to read if you ever get hold of it. Alice Bailey, of course, who was the amanuensis for the Tibetan, Master Dwar Kul, who was the master who works very closely with the Master Kutumi, and of course who transmitted these books to Alice Bailey. The Buddha, second ray soul, first ray personality. The poet Robert Browning, who was a previous incarnation of one of the English masters, I believe. Again, many of us these days, depending on how old we are, don't have a very good background in a lot of these personalities. So, but if we go and investigate them, we can certainly dig up plenty. If we resonate with a certain personality and read about their life stories, for instance, we can glean, we can put our finger on something and go, yes, that's, I can see the second ray, I can see the first ray, and so forth. Mother Teresa, a good example of the first ray, and also strong sixth ray of devotion and idealism, coming from that Catholic background. Nick asks, which ray is most likely to be visible in direct sun? Again, I don't understand the question, I'm sorry. You have to frame your questions. The rays are invisible forces, essentially. So we're talking about causal energies that come in, stream into this planet and condition, excuse me, every kingdom in nature. All right, moving on to the 2-3 types, we have Plato. Of course, Plato's Academy is the main picture that we feature 10 minutes before with the music before each class. And the two main personalities walking through the gate in that picture are Plato and Aristotle. And of course, the third ray is the ray of philosophers. And we have Socrates, therefore. We have Aristotle. We have the third ray, which was so strong in expression in Greece, the third and fourth rays in Greece, in fact. Plato is another avatar, highly evolved being from who is what is called a so-called fifth rounder by Blavatsky, which means, well, it's a very esoteric explanation, but way ahead of human evolution, but sowed some very powerful seeds that have been the foundation of Western philosophy and also democracy. And likewise, Socrates, another advanced initiate. Meister Eckhart, strong on the sixth ray as well. Origen, Martin Buber, there's a lot of religious personalities here. Marilyn Ferguson, the author of The Aquarian Conspiracy. The teacher in ancient Rome or Greece, I can't remember which one now, Hypatia, a woman who was probably at least a third degree initiate. Henry James, the American philosopher. Okay. So we have 2-4 types. The fourth ray is very strong with the psychologists and the writers. So we have Carl Jung, Dostoevsky, the Russian writer, wonderful books, so colorful. The fourth ray is the ray of color and drama, beauty. And so if you haven't read Dostoevsky, I recommend it, particularly appropriate at this time with Russia being so prominent in the world. Dane Rudhyar, the astrologer, who was a good friend of Alice Bailey's, in fact wrote the foreword to one of her books. Roberto Assagioli, who was one of the disciples within the 4 groups that the Tibetan had over a period of about 30 years. The Italian psychologist, who wrote several books that were based on the rays but didn't reference them. So The Act of Will is one of his books, and it spawned the whole psychological discipline called psychosynthesis. Very important, very powerful. Many people in psychosynthesis don't have much esoteric training or any at all, but that system works for them and they're doing very good work in that area. The writer Charles Dickens is a classic 2-4. Of course, being English and Britain being a second-range soul, Charles Dickens is a good example of someone who's come forth from the national soul and has been a powerful figure as Shakespeare, for instance. Shakespeare, in fact, of course, was the amanuensis for the Master R, or Francis Bacon, as he was known at the time. Carl Rogers, got Dostoevsky twice here, and Carl Rogers twice, bit of a typo there. So, Diane says, you mentioned that one master was previously the Shohan of a particular ashram. That's Master R. Do they change ashrams to do different types of work with humanity? Well, yes and no, but essentially they take the role of a custodian of an ashram for a certain period of time, but then when they pass a certain initiation, they vacate that position and go on to other work beyond the solar system. And so everyone else within the hierarchy, disciples, initiates, and so forth, have to step up and fill the vacuum. 2-5 types, we have Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is in the book by Alice Bailey called Light of the Soul. If there was any of the blue books that I would keep, if I only had a choice to keep one, that would be it, because I regard it as the manual of liberation. If you follow the guidelines in that book, in the meditation. Patanjali was a teacher. Maybe there were a few Patanjalis, I think. One about 10,000 years ago, one much further back than that, I think. But essentially, he was a Manu or a great teacher for the fifth root race. Fritjof Capra, the physicist, on the fifth ray, obviously, and of course Patanjali, we're looking at the fifth ray of esoteric science, not exoteric science, like Fritjof Capra. Hippocrates, the Greek medicine man, the Hippocratic oath that doctors take. Christopher Hills, the American philosopher. Bhagavan Das, who wrote The Science of the Emotions. Very good book, an essential book, I think, for many people in the path. Really in-depth psychology, and of course D.K. recommends that book in one of his books through Alice Bailey. Peter Russell, I think he's another physicist or biologist maybe. 2-6 types, we have Abraham Maslow. We have Charles W. Leadbeater, the theosophist, psychic, clairvoyant, who discovered Krishnamurti, in fact, very much on the sixth ray, and was a controversial figure as a theosophist, and worked very closely with Annie Besant. Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, the great swan, very advanced initiate who was a great bridge between India and the West. Benjamin Spock, the medical guy. Helen Keller, the blind woman who I think helped develop Braille, did she not? Emerson, the philosopher. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the writer. Judith Hollister, I don't know who she is. So we have the seventh ray types of the second ray. Confucius, Chinese philosopher, who is apparently predicted by DK to make a reappearance as one of the masters very soon amongst humanity, and obviously has some Chinese associations that he may attend to, but also will be working with the West as well. The Dalai Lama, Manly P. Hall is a great example of a 2-7 type. Does anyone know his books? He's written literally hundreds of books, American, and his book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. You can buy some deluxe versions that are about this big in color. They're like this, and smaller paperback versions. Highly recommended. The Swedish mystic and scientist Swedenborg, really an amazing individual, what they call a polymath, so skilled in so many areas. A seer, a clairvoyant, a scientist, a mining engineer. Then we have Maria Montessori, who developed the child education. Florence Nightingale, who I did a profile of a few newsletters ago. You can find on my website, quite a lengthy profile I wrote on her life. And likewise, Tara Barton, I mentioned in the same article as the woman who helped to found the Red Cross through her work in the Civil War. Couple comments to look at here. Yes, MPH's library in Los Angeles, I've taken several courses there, says Claudia. Yes, I've been to that library. It's a wonderful place to go. Oh, he was Canadian. I beg your pardon. Thank you for the qualification there. Adam, probably a Canadian yourself. And he moved to Los Angeles. Thanks for the information. I never knew that. From Toronto. And a friend of mine, in fact, has visited the vault at that Manly Palmer Hall had of all the most precious secret books that you can imagine that were kept in a special vault, like a bank vault. Anyway, Thomas More, as well, the English philosopher, 2-7, reputedly an incarnation of one of the masters as well. So ideally, we could have gone through this last but I think the missing tabulation, which I'll find before next week, will be fine as far as rounding out our understanding of the rays. We've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to start on the third ray with the first sub-ray. And again, this is the philosopher's ray. So a lot of philosophers here and creative people, film directors, politicians. Machiavelli over here in 3-6 is a classic example of the third ray scheming, kind of shape-shifting, sort of strategizing third ray type. But we have Karl Marx in the 3-1 position. If anyone's seen a picture of Karl Marx, he looks like a lion. Got this huge shock of hair and this very powerful face. And I don't think he's got Leo in his horoscope. I think he might be Taurus. I did do a brief profile on one of my newsletters recently. You can find on my website. Rockefeller, Bertrand Russell, the philosopher. You know, when you have the first ray in your makeup, quite often you're a pioneer. And again, we have the association of the first ray with Aries, for instance. Voltaire, the French philosopher, of course, France is a third-ray personality. Gertrude Stein, the character Shylock in the Shakespeare plays, is a classic third-ray stereotype, archetype. J.P. Morgan, the financier, is also a good example of the third-ray because the third ray is the business ray, it's the money ray in many ways, as is the seventh ray. And also the ruthlessness of the first ray, just bulldoze through over the top of everyone else. Run roughshod is a good expression to use for the first ray. So 3-2 types, we have Spinoza, the philosopher, Albert Einstein, a classic example of the third ray. I may have mentioned in another class about how they found Einstein, no one had heard from him for a while, and they went to his place, they found him in the bath where he'd been soaking there for 2 or 3 days, lost in the abstract. And that's the third ray is very much up on the abstract plane of the higher mental plane, or even the atomic plane, the source of all ideas. But a very strong second ray compassionate factor. He was a musician as well and had many beautiful sayings that were very second ray in terms of their quality. Thomas Aquinas, also another religious sort of philosopher. Lewis Carroll, the writer, the creator of Alice in Wonderland, a classic example of the third ray imagination. Also, apparently Lewis Carroll had a great interest at one stage in his life in mathematics. And the Tibetan tells us that when a person, when that happens in a person's life, it indicates a strong influence of the second ray of love wisdom. Mathematics is on a few different rays. There's different types of mathematics. Of course, geometry is on the seventh ray, but there's a third ray mathematics, there's a fourth ray mathematics, and apparently a second ray mathematics. Copernicus, the astronomer and philosopher, obviously, and astrologer, third ray. Edward Gibbon, the philatelist, the stamp guy. Spinoza, another well-known philosopher. I don't know much about him. And so we have the third, fourth ray types, where we have Sartre, Woody Allen, Steven Spielberg, Steve Allen. These are all well-known modern personalities that have that classic combination of the third and fourth ray that I think makes the best film director. Spielberg, of course. James Joyce, the Irish writer, so colourful, you know, the word pictures and poetry. Jules Verne, of course, the writer of many tales, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 80 Days Around the Earth, and so forth. Great imagination the fourth ray brings, as does the third ray, in fact. Mark Twain, of course, and Steve Allen, the comedian. We might as well just finish these third ray ones. We have, with the 3-5 types, Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer, a classic combination there. Archimedes, who is also can be related to geometry. Aristotle, who was very material in his thinking. So there again, you have the third and fifth rays with that strong sort of concrete expression. Isaac Newton, of course, very important scientist in recent history. David Bohm, who Krishnamurti had many conversations with, a physicist who started to really show how basically to reveal through science the first 4 etheric subplanes of the physical plane, the discovery of the first ether and so forth that the Tibetan also talks about. J. von Neumann and Rudolf Carnap, I don't know who those guys are. 3-6 types, and therefore we have a little bit of the devotion, the idealism, the fanaticism with the sixth ray. We have Trotsky, Machiavelli, Giordano Bruno, who was an astrologer who was burned at the stake during the Inquisition. Definitely an advanced initiate, Italian, obviously. His life is really worth looking into, reading up about. Andrew Carnegie, the American entrepreneur, in fact, his wife was part of the Tibetans groups that he had 30 years in New York City. Pascal, and of course the Joseph Goebbels, who was the Minister for Propaganda. And there you have the third ray, which is the ray of media, and the sixth ray of, the most glamoured ray, if you like. The weaving, the third ray is also called the weaver, so the weaving of glamour, the third and sixth ray, which Goebbels did so well for the German population in World War II. Right. And so we move on to the last column here, the third, seventh ray. We have Euclid, who was a great proselytizer of geometry. James Baker, the foreign minister in the US administration. Mark Edmund Jones, the astrologer, who did a lot of work with the Sabian symbols from the 20th century. Johann Kepler, the astronomer. Henry George, don't know who he is. Kant, and Andrew Mellon. Kant was Immanuel Kant, I think his name was I think a German philosopher, I believe. So there you have just a few personalities to pique your appetite.